next item on our agenda is a presentation for legislative update from Senator Knezek.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sitting behind.
Certainly our pleasure to welcome Senator Knezek here tonight to discuss some pending legislation that he's working on.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent and Madam President, members of the board and the administration. For those in the audience or at home that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is David Knezek. I'm the new state senator for the 5th District. That encompasses all of Redford Township, Detroit, Dearborn Heights, Garden City, and Inkster. I know members of the board have the presentation I'm about to give in front of them today. Very fortunate to have it up on digital so that folks in the audience can follow along. In case anybody wants to have a paper copy of that presentation to take home with them, I've got one sitting right over here as well as a couple other documents that I'll talk about here in a second. The focus of today's conversation is going to be on Senate Bill 447, legislation that I introduced this month in the Michigan Senate dealing with how we fund unified school districts. I've given this presentation to the Redford Township Board of Trustees. I've given this presentation to the Redford Union School Board, and earlier today met with members from both teachers unions as well as the support staff unions as well in regards to this presentation and the legislation that I'm working on in Lansing. To give a little bit of background about what prompted this conversation, particularly as it relates to our community, back in May of 2015, when Superintendent Stoneman departed from the Redford Union School District, Michigan State Superintendent Michael Flanagan sent a letter to the superintendents of both districts, the school board members of Redford Union, indicating that with the departure of Superintendent Stoneman, now might be a prime opportunity to continue to have discussions around the district, district unification. Now, these are conversations that we know we've had for decades here in the Redford Township community, but have not come to pass. If anybody wishes to have a copy of that letter, I have brought copies of the letter as well, so you can see the correspondence between members of the State Board of Education and our local school boards. When I individually was in receipt of this letter, and obviously being new to representing Redford Township, took that opportunity to take a deeper dive into current legislation surrounding unified school districts, other school districts that have gone through that process across the state of Michigan, the formulas associated with that, and would it or would it not work here in our community. I learned through that process a couple things. The first of which is that Redford Township is one of the only communities in the entire state of Michigan where you have 2 school districts whose boundaries lie entirely within one municipal boundary. And so again, somewhat of an anomaly here in our community. As I indicated earlier, for decades, individuals within the Redford Union School District and the South Redford School District have had conversations surrounding unification. And again, for whatever reasons, those ideas have not come to fruition. And a third thing that I think is important to point out, obviously the rumor mill is what it is when legislation comes out. I've accepted that as a part of the job. But I think it's very important for the individuals in this room to take away with them. This is not a decision that I can make unilaterally. This is not a decision that the Michigan legislature can make unilaterally. It will be a decision made by the residents of Redford Township when they have, if they have, the opportunity to vote on whether or not they want to unify the school districts here within our community. Just to walk folks through the foundation allowances that we have between the 2 school districts, incredibly appropriate given the presentation that we just received. And I hate to bore folks with 2 long presentations back to back. But if I'm a student in the Redford Union School District, I receive $7,391 per pupil. That's the foundation allowance that is given to the resident, or the students rather, in Redford Union. If I'm a student here in South Redford, I get a $7,915 per pupil allotment. You look at the size of our individual districts. This is based upon our estimates at the state. Obviously, when we have a count date coming up here, we'll have a much tighter idea what that number will look like. But as it relates to population, relatively similar in sizes. So let's say, for example, the residents in Redford Union School District and South Redford School District wanted to go through with the unification process, okay? So individually, if you were to take the foundation allowance for South Redford and if you were to take the foundation allowance for Redford Union and add them together, you would get $48,271. And again, that's just based upon this year's numbers, foundation allowance only. The formula currently says if you want to unify school districts, You take the weighted average of those two foundation allowances, you add $100 to it, and that sum is the new foundation allowance for every student in that new unified school district. So the weighted average between the two foundation allowances that I talked about on this previous slide, the weighted average, $7,662. I add $100 to it, I get $7,762. Times it by the number of students between both districts, and I get $48,900,600. Again, individually, we bring in this much as two school districts. If we were to unify under the current formulas, we would bring in this much as a unified school district. That's an increase of roughly $630,000. And why is that number important? That $630,000 would do absolutely nothing when it comes to improving the educational experience for our children. As it relates to increased costs that would come with contractual obligations, legal fees, curriculum alignment, technology, things that we've talked about here today, that $630,000 gets eaten up pretty darn quick. And it leaves us without anything that we can then invest in the classroom and in our students. And so, in short, Senate Bill 447 allows us to continue to have conversations here in Redford Township by changing the funding formula so that that decision could make fiscal sense, again, if the residents wanted to move forward with that decision. So instead of saying we take the weighted average of the two districts and add $100 to it, my legislation, Senate Bill 447, says if you want to have unified school districts, you take the higher of the two foundation allowances and add $100 to it. And the impact, as you'll see, is quite substantial. If we were to take that higher of the two foundation allowances, again, the higher foundation allowances here in South Redford, $7,915 per student, you add $100 to it, you get to $8,015 per student, multiply it by the number of students in the unified school district, and you come out to $50.5 million. So what was once a $630,000 increase is now a $2.2 million increase. Again, giving us the opportunity to go through whatever processes we may have to in order to unify those school districts while leaving significant resources over that we can invest within the classroom and within our children. So just in conclusion on this legislation, again, Senate Bill 447 allows for the conversations surround unified school districts to continue here in Redford Township, because as it stands right now, there is no conversation because it doesn't make financial sense. And again, if this bill were to be adopted, and if the residents of Redford Township were to move forward with the unification, we know that that would result in an increase of $2.2 million for the students here in Redford Township. Now, that applies to everybody across the state of Michigan, right? So one of the questions that I got when this legislation was first being drafted and introduced, is it just for Redford Township? Does it apply to everybody? Would you do it in your own community? I'm from Dearborn Heights. The answer is yes, I would. Dearborn Heights, you've got Dearborn schools, Crestwood schools, D7 schools, Westwood schools. Far too much administrative overhead, in my opinion, and less resources that are going into the classroom. Would I want this for my own children, my own district? Absolutely, I would. But as it relates to Redford Township, it's important that we look at the factors that are unique to our community and the districts that we have, and why I believe that this is a conversation worth having here in our community. The first, as I mentioned earlier, Redford Township is one of the only municipalities where you have two school districts whose entire boundaries fall within those municipal boundaries. And again, a reminder that any discussion or effort to unify the school districts under the current formula absolutely cannot happen. Senate Bill 447 would have to be adopted first before we could move forward with any conversations surrounding unification. Challenges to unification. We've got some good examples of this across the state. Places where it's worked, places where it's failed, places where the conversation started and never gotten off the ground. I say, in my personal opinion, based upon the research and conversations I've had, the first harbinger to those conversations would be school debt obligations, whether it's as a district, bonded indebtedness, you name it. I'd be happy to address those things in a second. And then secondly, school identities. I'll give an example of Garden City, another community that I represent. There was a time when we had East Garden City, West Garden City. Now we're all one Garden City. The rivalries are still alive and well to this day. I think it's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. But, you know, for a number of reasons, that becomes a difficult conversation to have. And so as I've said across every presentation that I've given, whether it's to the union officials, whether it's to the Redford Union School Board, whether it's to members of the Township Board of Trustees, as somebody who deals with the legislative process every day and sees what that looks like, I appreciate and I respect and I encourage the infusion of emotions into that legislative product. Many times I think it results in a better product. But when it comes time to having decisions about the facts and the numbers, and particularly when it's the future of our children that are at stake, I think it's important that we set aside the emotions, look at the facts, and try to do what's in the best interest of the children and the children only. And as I pointed out in that last slide, if we fail to allow the facts to guide our decision-making process, there's only one group of people that are going to hurt from that, and that's going to be the students themselves. This gives you an example of the historical foundation allowances between South Redford and Redford Union. South Redford is represented by the orange bar. Redford Union is represented by the blue bar. And this goes all the way back to 2009. You can see at some point the disparity was almost $1,000 difference between students in South Redford and Redford Union. This year's foundation allowance, I believe off the top of my head, is a difference of $524. But if I'm a student who started school in 2011, by the time I get all the way through high school within the Redford Union School District, I've lost out on significant sums of money that could have been invested in my school district. And so again, I remind folks, if I'm a student in Redford Union, $7,391. If I'm a student here in South Redford, $7,915. And just to give you an example of how, really silly in my opinion, the state has been with some of this. If you look at the dividing line between the two school districts, majority of it runs through the golf course. Then you'll hit Dixie, you can come down and hit Acacia. If I live on the north side of Acacia Street, I'm worth $524 less than a student who lives on the south side of the exact same street. In my opinion, doesn't matter if you're from the north side of town, doesn't matter if you're from the south side of town, if you are a Redford Township student, you should be receiving the same amount of foundation allowance. You are worth just as much as any other child that we have in this community. And the unfortunate reality right now is that in the eyes of the state, they're not. Now obviously these numbers are going to be updated pending the presentation that we just received. Based upon my conversation with Dr. Shivers and Redford Union, I believe that they are supposed to have their audited financials back within maybe the next 2 to 3 weeks. And so my intent would be to update this slide and indicate such on the first slide. But if we're going simply off the 2014 audited financials at Redford Union, we have an operating fund balance of $523,000, which is 2%. For 2014, South Redford's was just over $4 million, an operating fund balance of 13%. As we just saw, that number is at $3 million, an operating fund balance of about 10%. And what I point out here is that there is absolutely no denying the fact that incredibly difficult decisions had been made within the Redford Union School District the last couple of years in order to get into the black. There's no questioning the fact that those difficult decisions have been made, and they've shown some real leadership within that school district. But one of the unfortunate side effects of that difficult decision making is that the teachers in Redford Union have given back for the last 2 years 11.5% of their salaries every single year in order to make that operating fund balance stable. This year, they're giving back 4% of their teacher salaries and getting all the steps and increases that they missed out on for previous years. In next year's next year's academic year, the teachers are not giving back any of their salaries per their current contract. And in case anybody has any questions about that contract, about those contributions that are made by the teachers, I have here a printout from the Redford Union Education Association contract signed between them and the school board that shows the 11.5% donation of their salaries for the last couple of years. And so my worry, trying to look to the future and trying to be proactive, is that when the teachers are no longer making such a substantial contribution back to the school district in order to make it financially solvent, Redford Union School District will be faced with a very difficult decision. And that is, number one, ask the teachers to again donate back a significant sum of their salary. Or two, look for a way to cut, I'd estimate on the conservative end, $1.5 million from their budget. I think, again, two very difficult decisions that would have to be made just in the years ahead. And so the last point that I touch on, and this is a point that I've heard a number of times, is, both school districts are in the black. Why would we want to have conversations surrounding unification if both school districts are currently in the black? And the answer is that really is the only time that you should be having conversations about school district unification, when that debt piece is no longer acting as a harbinger between those two school districts and that conversation. This gives you an example of the academic achievement that we've had within our two school districts, South Redford in the blue, Redford Union in the green. This is an example of student enrollment. Again, we'll be able to update based upon the upcoming count day. You'll read in the newspaper that Redford Union has seen an increase in enrollment this year of 700 students, which is a great thing. If you add up what the individual increases are within each school, however, you will get a number significantly lower than 700. And so it's not good enough for us to present as electives what the increase is. It's important to point out what the net increase is, because if we have an increase of 700 students, how many students did we lose? I know in years past, different districts would have perhaps an increase of 400 students, but they'd also lose 600 students in the process. That's not an increase of 400 students. That's a loss of 200 students. And in conclusion, and there's one more thing I'll say here as it relates to this conversation and bonded indebtedness. A reminder that the decision as to whether or not these two school districts should move forward with unification, that decision lies entirely with the people. It's nothing that I can do unilaterally as a legislator. It's nothing I want to do unilaterally as a legislator. You're laughing because you know. But again, given the opportunity that's before us, should Senate Bill 447 be signed into law, I truly do believe that we owe it to our children to have these conversations. And I would give significant credit to the members of the teachers' unions that I sat down with today for their class. I mean, incredibly professional, classy. They understand what's at stake. They want to do what's in the best interest of the children. They want to do it the right way, and that's critical to this entire conversation, doing it the right way, getting buy-in from everybody across the community. But I believe that we owe it to the children to have that conversation. Now, I've had a number of questions from folks saying, well, we need to have town hall meetings. We need to talk about this right here, right now. And the reason I've given some pushback on that answer in the immediate future is because if you want to have a conversation about whether or not we should unify our school districts right here, right now, the answer is no, we shouldn't, because it doesn't make financial sense. I've tried to think of a good analogy to give to folks to better understand that, and the poor analogy I've come up with, I think of when I was younger and living at my parents' house. It would be like me going off and buying appliances and furniture and a bunch of things for a new house when not even approved to go out and get a mortgage. If Senate Bill 447 is adopted, and if we can have those conversations here in Redford Township, it would be my commitment to the community to provide as many opportunities for conversation, feedback, input as possible. That would be my intent, because I want to get everybody on board with this idea, because I think it's the right thing to do. Now, I had an individual come to me the other day, and again, the point I'm about to make highlights why putting the cart before the horse isn't the right idea. The legislature, as you know, can change 1,000 times between now and a year from now, and now and 2 years from now. This bill could change 1,000 times for all I know. And so somebody came to me and said, David, I'm looking at what our bonded indebtedness is in Redford Union. And the sum is, for estimation purposes, about $20 million bonded indebtedness. And the bonded indebtedness for South Redford, obviously things are changing, but about $30 million. They said, if I am a resident of Redford Union, why would I ever vote to unify our debt and spread it evenly amongst us? Why should I have to pay the bill of something that was adopted in South Redford? I didn't vote for that tax. Why should I have to pay it? And I said, that is a great question. And I don't have an answer for you right now, so let me go back and do some homework. So for days, was poring over legislation, poring over what an opportunity or an option would be in order to address that question. And just last Wednesday, as I walked into session, I was approached by members of the Republican majority who said, Senator, we've added a new bill to committee today. You need to take a look at it. I said, well, that's great. What does it do? Who wrote it? They said, it's written by David Rutledge, Representative David Rutledge from Superior Township. I said, that's great. What does the bill deal with? He said, it deals with unified school districts. I said, oh, what about unified school districts? He says, it deals with bonded indebtedness. I said, oh, what about bonded indebtedness? And he said, well, some folks believe. Now, mind you, Representative Rutledge represents Ypsilanti Willow Run, where they have gone through with the unification process. And they said, Senator, some folks in Ypsilanti Willow Run feel that if they voted for a bond here, they shouldn't have to pay for the bond that came from Ypsilanti or Willow Run. I said, I've heard the same thing before. So what does this bill do? The bill that's currently before the Senate this week for passage and signature by the governor states that if districts want to go through the unification process, they can A, vote to unify their bonded indebtedness and refinance on that bonded indebtedness, or they can opt to keep the bonded indebtedness with the original homestead properties that voted for it in the first place, so that no one ever has to pay for bonded indebtedness that they themselves didn't vote for. And answer a question that came out of this process that as recent as 7 days ago, I didn't have an answer to. And 4 days later, we have an answer from a completely different legislator from a completely different part of the state. Things are going to change so rapidly over the next year, 2 years, whatever it may be. When the time is appropriate, I will do whatever it takes to give whatever voice is necessary to the residents of Redford Township to make this right. And I've said time and again, folks say, well, why do you even care about this issue, David? You're not from Redford Township, what do you care? And I brought another document for folks so they want to take it back. The state of Michigan has demonstrated time and time again, if you don't take control of your own destiny as a municipality, as a school district, as a county, whatever, if you don't take control of your destiny, the state of Michigan's got no problem coming in and taking control of it for you. And the worst case scenario was in my district when they dissolved the Inkster Public Schools. Now, I'm not saying that to stoke the fear or what have you, but I'm saying as recently as the last presentation I gave to the Redford Union School Board, 2 days later, the state of Michigan overtook 16 school districts across the state to manage their operations and their finances. I'm not trying to scare folks. I'm not trying to sell you a bill of goods. The state of Michigan has no problem coming in and taking control of the community if we don't take control of it ourselves. I think this is a very rare, a very unique opportunity to show some real leadership here in Redford Township and to do what's best in the interest of our children. And I know, I guarantee you, with respect to the school board members, every single one of us that have ever ran for office, I guarantee the words, "I'm doing it for the kids," have come out of our mouths. I've said it. I bet you all have said it too. If we look at an opportunity to streamline operations in our community, if we look at an opportunity to put millions of dollars in the classroom for our children, if we look at that opportunity and say no, we're not doing it for the children. We're doing it for ourselves. And that's not right. And with that being said, I'd be happy to turn it over to any members of the board for comments, questions, or concerns.
Mr. Beck?
So dust off your crystal ball and tell me how likely 447 is going to get passed.
Yeah, so I would respond to that by saying I've taken it to members of the majority. And there's a significant interest within the majority party because this isn't an issue that's unique to Redford Township, as I pointed out. It's in my hometown of Dearborn Heights. It affects a number of smaller districts across the state of Michigan. I will say to you, as I said to members of the union today, I'm cognizant of the fact that there is road funding, energy policy, Detroit public schools, and a number of other issues that are taking up a lot of oxygen in the room. But let me be very clear to everybody. My intent, my hope would be that we can get a hearing on this legislation as soon as possible, because I want to make sure that we can have the conversations here in the community as soon as possible. And so I could never guarantee you anything. I got great pieces of legislation that took me years to get passed because So many factors are out of our control. But I will say that there is interest in the legislation from Democrats and from Republicans, and it is my intent to make sure that I'm pushing the need for this legislation as much as I can within the legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Through the chair.
Mr. Downey?
Wonderful presentation, by the way. You know, showing the facts, the figures, you know, the numbers, the monies, the how many kids. I mean, those are all wonderful people that need to understand that. And I'm not like here shouting, and, you know, unify, don't unify. I'm not shouting nothing. I'm just telling you it was a great presentation.
Appreciate that.
And really what I wanted to say is I've been in the township most of my life. You know, when I moved here from Chicago, you know, and I'm not here tooting my horn, I just want to give you my perspective. You know, I was on the Parks Commission, served the township. I was on City Council, served the township. I ran RTJAA, which served the township. I coached for 20 years, I ran it for 10 years. You know, I've been involved in the township. I'm a South Ender, and it kills me even saying that, to be honest with you. Even as a, you know, a youngster, I was always wondering, why is there a North End? Why is there a South End? Why aren't we just run for township? You know, why is it we and they? I've never got it. And I still don't get it. We're 6 by 2. I don't get a we and a they. I really don't understand that. I don't get, I mean, I can say, understand, okay, I live on the north side of town. I live on the south side of town, east side of Redford, west side of Redford. I get all that, you know, just to let people know where you live, give them proximity. But I've never gotten the we and the them and the us and the them and the we and the they. And I just wish that would end in general. And if this is a step towards it, I don't know. That's not up to me, and that's up to you folks if we go down that ladder. I do agree with you. We don't want the state taking us down that road. That's the worst thing that could happen. You know, I'm not going to get here into politics, but we know the governor, his thing, he'll take a city or throw out the board. He'll take a school district, throw out the board, and they'll do what they're going to do. You know, that's the last thing we want to do. We at least want to keep our control of our own destiny as much as we can. So, you know, if the thing goes through, the bill goes through, you know, what the good thing is, it comes down to the people to make the vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes this country great. You know, to get off my pedestal here, but that's what makes this country great, is people voting for what they want. So, again, I'm not endorsing nothing as of yet, because I don't think we're at that point, but my big battle cry is still, why is it us and them, we and they? I wish we would knock it off.
The only thing I would follow up on that, sir, is you know, when I spoke particularly with the teachers' unions today about the things that South Redford is doing good, and things that Redford Union is doing good, things that Redford Union does to serve South Redford students. For me, I look at it as a real opportunity to develop what I would call, you know, a destination district here in Redford Township. We got the best of both worlds, firing on all cylinders, and more money in the classroom for the kids. So, you know, again, I see a lot of positives to it. I know there's going to be a process to get there, but I'm committed to that process. I'm in it too deep now to run away from it. So I appreciate those comments.
Anyone else from the board? Senator Knezek, the only kind of question, but not really even a question. I'm awful glad that you mentioned not putting the cart before the horse.
Sure.
And I think it's important that we wait and see what happens with the 447 before everybody starts to include any type of panic.
Sure. And as I said to folks today, the majority could come to me tomorrow and say, Knezek, we're done with that. It is done. I don't want that to happen, but it could very well happen. I try not to upset them as much as I can. But if the bill gets passed, you know, my vision for the community would be a very vigorous effort to bring in as many voices as we can to be a part of that process. You know, I get folks, obviously, that feel very strongly about this issue that reach out to me. I give everybody my cell phone number. I tell them, let's go grab a coffee. Let's go out to my coffee. You take your pick. I'm happy to talk about it at any place at any time. And what you find is that there might not be as much opposition as folks want you to believe there's out there in the community. Folks that will tell me in a closed door, we think it's the right thing to do, and then go out in public and put it on blast. So everyone's got their prerogatives. I respect that. I do this for a living. So again, as I shared with the Redford Union School Board, I shared my personal cell phone number with everybody publicly. If you've got a problem, question, concern, you don't want to say it now, you want to say it later, my cell phone number is 313-854-0161. Again, that's 313-854-0161. You can test it now if you want. I'll just-
I already asked her during the
Sorry.
board talk.
Yeah. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to come, give an open and forthright presentation on what's going on. And my hope would be is that for the folks in the audience and the folks up at the board table and here on the administration, that without being an advocate for one direction or the other, you can at least be an ambassador for the facts and the truth. That's all I ever ask. Folks can disagree with me all day long. I'll do it respectfully disagree with you. Freudian slip. And I would hope the same back for me. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and look forward to working with everybody again moving forward. Thank you.
Some of the audience members came to listen to the senator speak and they want to leave at this point. You're more than welcome to. You can pick up some of the copies of the papers that the senator brought.
Is there something you'd like me to
We have a couple more
put?
items.
You know, there's a table right
I'll
outside.
do it right outside there. Thank you. I apologize.
Okay, not a problem. We have a couple more items on our agenda.